A bright morning to all. On behalf of the entire conference team at Satish Misal Education Foundation's Brick School of Architecture, we welcome you. Our founding director, Ms. Pooja Misal, shaped SMEF's Brick School of Architecture's vision to impart a research-driven architectural education in an inclusive, learner-centered environment that welcomes students from diverse socio-economic, cultural backgrounds, and abilities, as well as unique thought processes. We take pride in our initiatives like Brick Research and Design Integrated Cell, Travel and Research Grants, Publication Cell, and collaborations with NGOs like Mashal, Taru for projects that bring out a positive change in the society. These have helped us bridge the gap between academia and the industry. We have been fortunate to be able to join hands with various universities across the world as well, to expand avenues for our students and faculty alike. Owing to these efforts, under the leadership of Ms. Pooja Misal, we are elated to share that we received a B+ accreditation from NAC.
Welcome back all. I extend a warm welcome to our keynote speaker, architect Jacob van Rijs from MVRDV, Netherlands. We are honored to have you with us, sir. Architect Jacob is the founding partner of MVRDV at interdisciplinary studio that works at the intersection of architecture and urbanism. In the past 25 years, architect Jacob has led a wide variety of projects from cultural and civic buildings to transformations and from residential buildings to social housing and interiors. His renowned past projects include the Danish Rock Museum, Community Center Cube and Frosilo in Denmark, Matsude Cultural Center in Japan, Mirador Social Housing in Madrid, Spain, and Casa Quantes in Schiedam, the Netherlands. Van Rijs has also worked extensively in Germany. In India, he supervises several large-scale housing projects from Future Towers to Orange Castle. Worldwide, he has experimented with ceramic facades, which he used in Gyre in Tokyo and M-Cube in Beijing, amongst others. Besides his work from MVRDV, Van Rijs is chairman of the board of Archipri International and chairman of the board of Architecture Film Festival Rotterdam. In the past, he has held positions as a professor of Technical University Munich and visiting professorships at the TU Delft at Sam University Madrid, Spain, Royal Academy of Arts Copenhagen, Denmark, and the Tokyo Institute of Technology. Currently, he is teaching at the Technical University of Berlin, Germany, where he is a professor of architectural design. Amongst the many awards that architect Jacob has received, a few are EU Maze Award 2022 nomination, Work 12, Munich DE, 2021 DAM Prize Best New Building in Germany, winner Work 12, Munich DE, Best Architects 21, winner Work 12, Munich DE. The list doesn't do justice to the time we have to describe his achievements, awards, and accolades. With mounting excitement, I request architect Jacob van Rijs to take over. The delegates could type in questions in the Q&A box. We would take them towards the end of the session. Over to you, sir.
Right. So thank you for the invitation. I am Jacob van Rijs, currently in my own home office. The people in the office are also working already, but it's a bit mixed. It's literally, as you mentioned, and as I mentioned already in the title, there's blurred boundaries, you could say, between where we live and where we work and how we organize our lives. And that's an interesting observation, and I think many people are trying to organize that in a more permanent way, because we don't see the quick restoring to normal life yet, or what is then normal again? Maybe there will always be some kind of mixture, and for everybody, it's not all, of course, not for everybody possible in the same way. So that's another topic. but looking at our own company, we now see that life goes back to normal, and even though some people can work from home with their feet in the sand, it gives also a certain new freedom, you could say, to organize that, and I think it means also quite something for architects and how we plan the future, not only for living but also for working, mobility, and many things will have an influence on that, and that can be an interesting solution for some cases. It might raise new issues, but we see it already in the planning and in our request from clients. That there are things changing in especially in office worlds, but of course also in future layouts maybe of apartments. I'd like to show you a couple of projects today, and but first a little introduction to the firm. I like to end with our project in Pune, so it's of course very nice that you invited me in your city in the brick school. I never had the opportunity to visit you when I was in Pune a couple of years ago for the project, but that makes always an interesting link for MVRDV and your city. MVRDV, of course, stands for Maas van Rijs de Vries. I'm the VR, but we have been developing into a larger group, and the name is not only linking to the founders, but it's also a bit of a brand itself. This is one of the possibilities that you could explain the company's name. We also try to dare and to experiment. And on our facade in the office, we have a collection of letter combination, word combinations that give a certain spirit to it's like a shop window in the street, and there these letters are standing. There's another one, more vision requires daring velocity. There was a small competition organized to find the best combination of words that would match our spirit, so to say. Or this one, somebody liked, depending on the time of the day. Right, but basically in one sentence, we try to create special projects in great spaces and environments, answering certain urgencies, and it's not always possible to answer them all together in one project, but in a collection of projects, depending on all kind of aspects and context and possibilities, you try to do the best you can, and sometimes that's a bit more than in other cases. At least, it's important to start and keep that mentality and that attitude alive. But I show you a little bit where we are based. This is a picture of the building that we are based. We are based in these 5 houses in the front. And this building is instead in Rotterdam. The picture was taken after the war. This was one of these post-war buildings in the city. Our city was damaged very heavily in the war, and this building was a kind of you could say an apartment building for companies that had lost their spaces to work, and the white houses in front that were the collective workshops. And the building is now, of course, standing in the city, but it stands a bit for the rebuilding of Rotterdam. It's a very bold, straightforward building, and it survives. Let's say the functionality is very much there still, even though the building is 70 years old. There's a new spirit with a lot of interesting people. There's a nice collection of spaces on the street side, and there's an internal street where there's all kind of bars, and you see here the galleries that give access to the office spaces. So normally a gallery is linked to a kind of housing situation, but here this building it was organized in an efficient way with one vertical circulation, and then people would walk to the spaces. And in the building on the low-rise building on the right, that's the base of our office, and we also have some space in the main building. This is not this is before a pandemic, of course, but this is the Friday afternoon spirit, and the palm trees are parked by the city, and they depend on for events. If there's an event, these trees they move to certain places in the city. our spaces, yeah, we have this is an interesting observation already. Yeah, the building can be designed for something else than it's might encounter. So this was the workshop space where things were built, mechanics were working, and it turned out to be a fantastic workspace for architects. And because it has open plan, kind of beautiful ceiling, and we took that opportunity when we moved into to see how would we work and how would we organize, let's say, the daily office routine. And we thought to split, let's say, the meeting and the concentration, the communication, where you have where you sit together and discuss design, or you have a client meeting, or you have a talk with a staff member. Depending on the situation, a certain mood is necessary, and that we organized it by making a series of colored rooms. And it's a little bit like this. Sometimes there's no choice of color because all the rooms are occupied, but depending on the type of meeting, you could select a shirt for the day, or for the event. You could select the color for the meeting. And if you sit in the orange room, life looks slightly different when you sit in the blue room, because when you sit in the orange room, everybody looks a bit more healthy, so to say. Depending on the context, you have different moods. We have our tribune. Sometimes we have lectures there, and sometimes there are sporting events like the ping pong championship we have every year. But also we have this long lunch table, which is a multifunctional element. Yes, right now during pandemic days, this is a bit like it is. You have little we have to split it up a bit, so we cannot have so many people. But sometimes it's packed normally, but we can also have separate meetings there. But how did things start? That is a quick update on the company. We started with this building that was finished in '97. Our office started in 1993. It was also already dealing with the new working. It was a building for a company that was in media, in television and radio, and they also needed a new form of working together. They were based in separate buildings, and this was a sort of deep office building with natural light coming in, and there were all kind of possibilities to form, let's say, clusters of collaborations, and this would be quite flexible depending on the type of programs and the type of people that would work together in the building. Another project of the early days was this social housing project in Amsterdam, super efficient, but also very radical building inside the garden cities of Amsterdam, the outside of Amsterdam, but also trying to have an urgent problem of the aging population, where people would actually like to stay independent for as long as possible. And this layout of the apartments made that made it possible. They were so to say wheelchair proof. You could move around. You would be less mobile. Accessibility is an important aspect, and it's closely located to all kind of care facilities. Instead of people going in an old age home, which is not the most exciting outlook for many, the people like to stay independent as long as possible, and these houses were part of that. Or this one, a collection of apartment layouts, each with a different facade, with a different interior, offering a collection of apartment lifestyles, you could say. People have different desires. Why make all these floor plans the same? And this was a discussion we had with our client and the city, and we collected this series of floor plans that we compiled in this block, like a collection of containers standing in the harbor, that offers this diversity. Or the big building in Hanover, the Expo Pavilion, which was a kind of advertisement for the Netherlands. Then pieces of the country that are normally next to each other are stacked on top of each other. And more recent, the Market Hall, quite closely located to our headquarters in Rotterdam, 5-minute walk. It makes a kind of an urban living room to the center of the city. And the arch contains apartments, and inside the arch we have this incredible, let's say, airspace where the market is based, but also creates this like a lantern in the evening. It's covered with like an art piece that creates this sort of intimacy in the urban surroundings. And this is on a market day. There's still the outdoor market. The city wanted to have an indoor market. The outdoor market was there, let's say, 2 days a week, but the market hall is open 7 days a week. And then by adding apartments to the center, this combination was made by making an arch instead of a U-shaped layout. These are 2 slabs and the market in between. We flipped it upside down, shaped the spaces into an arch, like an efficient structural element, and bended these slabs for the apartments slightly so that it could be built in a straightforward way. Also, this building has a collection of layouts. You have this bridge apartments, you have some duplexes, apartments that are facing the market or having a one-side orientation. And beside that, it has this there's a nice parking garage and the supermarket below. And of course, on the ground floor, shops and bars and cafes. And it's an entry point for the city. You could park your car in the garage, go up with the escalator, and then you are in the middle of this market space. And you can go out in the center, do your shopping and meet some friends or whatever. Or you can also live here, so to say. So this is one typical apartment with, of course, also outside views, but also indoor views. On the ground floor, bars that have windows to the facade, terraces to the outside, but also to the inside. So it offers a really variety, a really mix of visitors, locals, people from outside Rotterdam, people from the Netherlands, tourists, so it's a bit, it's quite an inclusive collection when you are there. You see, maybe not so many Chinese tourists now, but every day they would stop a bus with people from China doing a tour in the Netherlands, and they would visit the market hall. But you see also, let's say, locals from the neighborhood here around the corner. So from far away and from close by, people would visit the building. You see also a bit of a picture here of Rotterdam, and this is the center. You see the old church that has been restored. This is also the area that was bombed in the war, so that was very empty. You see then a collection of buildings that came. There's no clear style. That's a bit of a funny mishmash. But anyway, every building has a certain identity, and together they create this atmosphere that's the city of Rotterdam. Anyway, these buildings express as well how should we live together, and that's a topic for the Biennale Venice at the moment. And in every project you could ask this question. And I'd like to show some examples, and starting with a couple of buildings that we recently made in Denmark. And you could say they're quite organized, so to say. It's also quite a similar country as the Netherlands, but maybe it's even more with more support from the state, and that resulted in some interesting public buildings that are quite generously funded, but also have a purpose, let's say, to improve the quality of life, the collective, the commons, so to say, and how in this case it's a building for a neighborhood in Frederiksberg. It's in Copenhagen, and it should serve the whole community. And maybe not this year, but the Danes, like the Dutch, are always up in the rankings of happiness. So how to be happy is an interesting question you could ask them. And the Danes, they say, well, to be average is to be happy. You could say, don't think you're special. And for the Kuba project, we worked together with a Danish company, Adapt, younger office. All of them, the founders were former staff of MVRDV, and so we had a good common history, so to say. And together we designed the building, and they were, of course, more on the ground and doing a bit more of the talking to the locals, and we were designing and developing ideas, then discussing it together in different workshops. So it's a very interactive design process. And I'd like to show you the result, which it's quite an intriguing project. It doesn't have an existing typology, but it's a mixture of many typologies that we know. And the question that we were asked in this invited competition was to develop a building that would be useful for all kind of different activities, like all kind of performance things, like theater, dance, sport, but also thinking, philosophy, Zen zone, let's say, for certain concentration and things like this, but also things like healthy food, cooking, eating, and moving, movements. So this was the kind of the holistic program, you could say, and each of these functions we arranged into a certain ideal shape, independent from each other. So that would be like this round meditation Zen zone, or a multifunctional box for sports, or a big like chimney-like space for the kitchen, a section that like a cross for the theater. So every element would have their own ideal shape, and we then collect them together, you could say, in the limited space we had available. And exactly where these clashes would happen, the interaction between the functions would be clear. So it was not a perfect kitchen, or a perfect library, or a perfect theater, perfect sports space. It would be this kind of slight imperfections, but a combination of other activities that would make this building attractive. So there will be a very easy combination between the functions. The zoning envelope, this is a simple block, and these functions we had were chopped off by this envelope, created the facade of closed and open spaces, but also showed the in-between zone, this play zone, we call it, that would connect all the different functions together in different, almost void and visual connections. So that's the step diagram. It's located here on the right, in the center of Copenhagen. Here you have Flintholm's, a metro stop in Frederiksberg, which is an independent municipality, but it's surrounded by Copenhagen. The building is designed, but in the design process, we created this participation aspect. We made a huge model, which is sort of a concept model scale 1 to 10 almost. It was transportable on a truck, and the model would then travel inside the city to different places where there would be events to discuss the possibilities, and also to connect different clubs and organizations to be part of the Kube concept, so that they could use the spaces, and we would discuss then how they would do that and what their wishes would be. And so that's the atmosphere. There would always be this little staircase where we had a little discussion. There would be activities, there would be dancing, and people from different clubs would come together. So that these ideas came back to the design space. We had workshops with some representatives, trying to find the solution, because the building was a new typology. You could say there was not an example that we could say, that we could, let's say, learn from, but they wanted to have this almost new combination. The play zone here, I go quickly through the zones. Here you see this effect that you have visual connections. You see people running, playing, sliding. You see people climbing. So when you are in this building, you immediately are surrounded by all kinds of different activities. It's for all ages. So people in the slides, you think that's for kids, but when you come in the evening, older people would also take the slides, and they don't mind so to use it, so to say. But also there's labyrinths to go up and down the building. You have to imagine that Denmark in the winter is not that nice to be outside. Of course, you can always go outside, but when you have the days are a bit shorter. So in a way, it's a playground inside the building. And so if it rains, you could also activate, let's say, be active inside this building. It's for different age kids. You could climb upside down from one floor to the next. There's all kind of ways to do that. This is on the net. You could lie there and look at the sky, but you could also have fun. And in this in-between zone, this play zone, yeah, you can also do things like this. This is a judo club practicing there, and it has the curtain, so you can close it off if you like it. But the next day there will be this kind of circus activities for children. They have like little matches to run and activities, and every time you have these links up and down with vertical visual connections. On the ground floor, the garden on the outside goes to the inside. This is like the climbing wall, very popular on Sunday mornings, where with young families, kids running around, and the parents have their latte cafe on the other side of the space. And it's quite. And on another moment of the day, this is used again for different combinations. So here's so in the white box, that's the sports space. The green box, the green space is the theater, and the red one is the meditation zone. And here again, this so that's all in the in-between spaces. And you have here the sports space, the dressing rooms. The think zone is a staircase with different spaces for let's say the library, so meeting rooms, discussion spaces, mediatek, and some offices. And again, they form this kind of big tribune, so to say, into the play zone. So these are separate rooms in this collection, so to say. The food zone is a big kitchen with a restaurant connection next to it. It's also a big chimney that contains some of this mechanical stuff. The performance zone is a kind of flexible black box theater, quite high, with a retractable tribune. And there's all kind of possibilities, let's say, for film, but also for, let's say, music and theater. And it has a big window to the backstage to connect the theater to the outside of the building, where you have a small park with an exterior auditorium, and then this the stage becomes the backstage, so to say, becomes the front stage. The pulse zone is the flexible sports hall. Here again, it's started as a square box, but then depending on how these other functions come in, it has little dents, so to say, in it. But the sport is very functional as well. You can have a gym there, you can have dancing lessons, and you can have all kind of activities in that space, like this or like that. So depending on the time of the day, different user groups from the neighborhood would have their activities. So here, classical ballroom dancing for elderly. Zen zone, it can be very different acoustics. You could have this kind of dancing lessons, or be yourself, roller disco, or quiet meditating sessions as well. And these connections, the vertical connections are organized by 3 cores. Every core has a different shape, but they have a neutral interior. This is the connection outside, because the spaces themselves are very, very colorful. The circulation, the emergency staircases, you could say, but also the internal connections have this kind of neutral scale. Then for the facade, we looked for material that is both different and quite normal. So not offensive, let's say, in making a super bright building, because the interior is already very, very bright, but also special enough to show that it's not a normal building. So we looked for this ceramic tiles. They're actually from Spain there, or maybe you know the famous work of Gaudi. This tradition basically is picked up by this product from Spain, and with which we had to adapt to the Danish climates and the Danish regulations, with freezing and below zero, above zero in winter time. So some additional work was done to make it happen with special glue. But the facade is now officially approved there. It's all pretty strict in terms of construction regulations. But the effect is very nice, that you have this sort of affecting the light and this kind of differences in color of the tiles, different shininess, creates this texture. It gives also a certain abstraction to to the composition, so it is really clear how the building is organized, almost like this diagram I showed. And depending on the let's say on the weather, it also reflects differently. And in the evening, it sort of shines out. Here, seen from above in the park. There's very strict regulations in Denmark about. Sorry, I don't have this. Oops, I have an image in my screen here. 1 second. Strange. Questions. I have a maybe you don't see that, but I have a question block in my thing. So, oops. Sorry, I go back to the thing to make sure it works again. Yeah. Okay, but then so the park designed by SLA landscape architects, it's developed on a similar way as the interior of the building. So all these different activities that are inside the building also have a position in the park. So there's a theater, there's spaces for thinking, there's sport spaces, there's spaces to meditate in the garden, but also it functions as a meeting spot for weekend events, like here a small market or a small party, and then the building serves as a backdrop for that. Yeah, so that's to give you a feeling of that of what a building could do, so to say, for the community, bringing people together by organizing all these activities, being like it's almost like a sponge for all these clubs that are in the neighborhood, and there in this combination, yeah, all those interesting connections appear. So when people come there or a family comes there, there's all kind of new things to be discovered, and yeah, so the community building is being enhanced by the architecture of this project. Another building we built there was transformation of a old industrial building in the city in Roskilde, a relatively small city not too far away from the capital, Copenhagen. And the city is very famous for the festival there. There's a big rock festival taking place every year. And the site itself is based on an old factory. Here, picture of the Roskilde. You have the fjord, you have the church. It's the city where, yeah, it's famous for the Viking ships that were found there. It's also the place where the kings are buried in the church over there. So the cathedral of Roskilde is very famous. And here you see the festival stage that is organized in summer. And I'd say more than, I think kind of 50,000 people gather there normally. I think it will maybe happen again next year. With a big stage, all kind of people going there for a couple of days. It becomes like a pop-up city, where all this, so the population of Roskilde is doubling during this festival. And you see that quite nicely here, this big campsite with different neighborhoods. And here you see this golden box, that's the Rock Museum. So the city wanted to organize and set up kind of present for the festival, even when it's not there, by organizing this Roskilde Museum, Rock Museum, and the festival school. They bought an old factory, concrete factory, and the transformation of the factory was subject of a competition. We proposed this first sketch idea where we combined old halls with new buildings, the Rock Museum, the school, and an office building. And the Rock Museum was built as a kind of like a different identity in that complex of halls on normal buildings. It would be like the singer of the band, and golden box with a flexible interior, and then on the ground floor, yeah, you connect the old and the new buildings. But I first like to explain this. I mainly like to explain the school building. This building was also designed together with another architect, Kobe. Also friends from the past, so to say. Their founders were also part of MVRDV for a certain while. They interns in the past, but now sometimes we work together in different projects, even today. But it also is an example of how to use existing structures. I think we should really consider that each time. Of course, there's lots of embodied carbon in a concrete structure. So when you are able to maintain that's a good thing, and not immediately think about demolishing it. And this was already clear without thinking about that. When you look at these spaces, they have a certain charm and also a certain attraction in the proportions and in the light. So this is a space where you can do many things. Lots of potential, you could say. So everybody agreed that this would be really logical, let's say, to keep the main structure, but also adapt it to future use, and that meant dealing with climate, dealing with a kind of comfort. So we organized the activities of the school, which is a kind of it's not a normal school, but it's a school you go to after your high school, before your university. So it's a bit in between, where you do not really know exactly what you want to do, or you don't want to start immediately with your university. This is quite common in Denmark to have this kind of in-between year where you can focus on different things and try to find out what you really like to do and what you're good at. So we looked for different atmospheres, similar as in the Kuba project, for different activities. The school is based in around 3 focus areas. Let's say the head, the body, the heart, and the hands. And so making things like in art and design, working with body in dance, theater, and these kind of things, but also thinking, philosophy, debating, writing, and that comes together in that box of the main hall. So for each of these activities, an ideal space was found. It would be the workshop, it would be a performance space, the orange stage linked to the festival orange stage. There would be rooms for discussion. There would be studio spaces for music, etc., etc. And then again, similar as this Kuba building, in the in-between space, the interesting combinations would appear. The tribune would be a meeting spot, but it could also be a stage for discussions, or when there's a performance, it would be the tribune for the event. But then again, the atmosphere organized by the main structure, these bold concrete columns that were actually produced on site, because it was a concrete factory before. But you also have to deal with the acoustics. So there's a new ceiling. There's natural light coming in. So the building is basically stripped apart from the main structure. This is a picture how it was, and you see how it has become. So a new floor, but still you see the old markings on the concrete, and it feels quite intimate. This box is let's say about 8 meters high, and it's about 45 by 45 more or less. It's overseeable, and at the same time very spacious, but not extremely big. And in every room you have your own atmosphere, and then you step out of your room, and then you are in this collective space, the performance space. They do the singing. It's not religious at all, but they have this sort of community feeling where there are different songs, like a song book. That's part of this of going to this school. So in the morning, sometimes in the evening, they have this singing moment. Next to the school is this museum, so this becomes like a neighborhood. There's also some housing that we did. There's other buildings being built by other architects, and the whole public space, the former factory area, is being transformed into a kind of an urban park. And that, I think, makes a nice bridge to this project we did in Munich, which is also a former, let's say, factory area, closely located to the center of town. And these areas, similar like the factory in Denmark, they offer great potential for transformations, because I think they have this additional quality in the fact that they have they're open, so to say. There's open in planning. It's not a fixed functionality. In Munich, this was a factory that was producing all kind of products for potatoes. A very strange thing, but anyway, that was located quite closely to the center. The potatoes were moved to other parts of Germany, and the factory was temporarily used as this Kunstfabrik, a space for all kind of creative activities, but also for parties. And in the 90s and the early 2000s, dance music became very popular, so this was where the rave parties would happen in those days. Took a long time to develop the master plan and for the reuse and the future planning, that a new mixed neighborhood could appear. Some buildings had to go, some are still in transformation, and there's a new neighborhood appearing in that area. But the history, the thing is that the company was sold to a larger company producing the potato stuff, but the owner and the family of that owns the company, they kept the buildings, they kept the factory itself, even though the activities are not there anymore. And I think that was a very smart idea, because the land value went up, but they're very much involved. It's the third generation of this family that founded the potato factory is now running, let's say, the master plan, and they're not selling, they're keeping these buildings, and they step by step they're adding and some new ones, that they're transforming existing ones. You see here in front of the station, it's the second station of Munich, Ostbahnhof, and it's very, very close to the center. You see here as well the building that was done by Steidler architect, the master planner, and on top the old state. It is not a very beautiful building, but you could see that it has high ceilings, it has a sort of sturdiness, a good structure. So the idea was to keep it, and on the bottom, the white version was the first idea, to make it into a clean white box. But after the history of this kind of the in-between use of this Kunstfabrik, the idea became to make the buildings more colorful. In this case, the colors relate to the colors of the products that are there. So this became an orange building. Extra layer was added, and at the same time, traces from the past, from the industrial past, but also from the creative past, were kept. So there's all kinds of interesting graffiti there. There's this roughness that is very, very attractive. We were asked to make a new building there, for all kinds of activities. It was not so clear yet what would happen, and we thought it would be very nice to take the lessons from the past by making the spaces as high as possible. So here you see the starting point of the project, which was six floors, basically, typical German regulations of the last floor had to do with the fire rating of the building. But then we said, okay, why won't we take out one floor and make all the floors so high that you can make mezzanines inside, put like little boxes, and on top of these boxes you could sit. So this will be the same amount of cubic meters, but also the same amount of square meters, except differently arranged. And because the height was a bit larger, the light would be able to come in. So we thought it would be exciting to have this flexibility, maximize it, have the circulation on the outside, almost similar as our office building that we are in Rotterdam, with the galleries and the collective core on the outside. And then you have spaces that are flexible for all kinds of things. On the facade, we, as a kind of nod to the graffiti, we like to have this sort of interactions with words. And there was a competition organized by the city and the client and us between different artists and writers, poets, to play with a certain amount of letters that we offered, with a certain amount of positions. Different events, different ideas came out, and a very simple one based on comics won. Maybe because it was so uncomplicated at the same time, but also, people sort of, you get a little bit of a smile when you see it. And if you come there every day, it's not so heavy, so to say, as well. So this fit the atmosphere the best, and the letters are positioned. During the day, the building is kind of neutral, and in the evening, it shines out. The letters change colors. You see here as well the height of the building. It is this 5.5 meter floor-to-floor height. That is not too high, but it's also absolutely not too low. So it gives a kind of royal space. And in that space, you could see that as well. There are little blocks that you could make a double floor in there. So the main the main tenant in the building is a fitness club. They occupy three floors, and on top there's a club area with office spaces and a bar. And on the bottom you have different restaurants that were there before on the site when it was this Kultfabrik. So we have a very diverse series of bars on the ground floor. And you see that the staircases they wrap around the facade, but they're also part of the structural system. They help to work with the stability. Of course, it's also a fire-rated wall, and because of that, the floors we need a structural core. So the core is on the outside with the vertical circulation, and the diagonal staircases they work. So we don't have a stability core in the middle. And during the design process, the main tenant, the fitness club, wanted to say, well, we can assign the contract, but on the condition that we can make a 25-meter pool in the building. And this would have been a big problem, because the building is built actually on an existing garage. But as we have been taken out one floor, instead of 6, it's 5. There was actually extra weight potential still available, and that was done with the help of a very good engineer. The weight of the water, so to say, is more or less the same as that extra floor that we took out, and so it was possible, structurally possible, to incorporate that. So the deal was made, and the pool was built. You see as well here. In the evening, it's an area that during the day people are working. It's a lot of creative companies, advertising companies, also places to have lunch. In the evening, the bars go open. There's discotheque in the basement. There's all kind of performances taking place, and the whole neighborhood is changing atmosphere. New buildings are being built on top of older ones. So there's lots of stuff to come. There will be the new theater of Philharmonic orchestra building for Munich that will be built on the Ferris wheel side. So this is an area where that industrial past becomes now, let's say, a very creative future. A little movie, I think, showing the atmosphere. Okay, I hope that was kind of visible. I have to hurry up. I see that the time is going faster than expected. Another scale, but a similar atmosphere, in the sense that an existing structure forms the base for new life, and that urban transformation, I think, in many places in the world are a topic to be very relevant, and how to transform them in such a way that you don't maybe erase everything, but see the existing as an inspiration for the future. And this is a very clear example of this. It's the transformation of a former highway. This highway across the main railway artery in Seoul, in Korea, into a pedestrian park. And this is the area. And you see this enormous barrier between the neighborhoods, this neighborhood here, this neighborhood there. And it's just hard to go from here to there. Of course, by car you would be able to do it, but it's a big infrastructural break. And especially on ground floor, this was the context. It was basically impossible to go across it. It was very, very hard. But of course, it had a history. This was in a way you could say a symbolic highway. It was maybe, it was the first city highway in Seoul. It would stand for, let's say, the modernization area of that time. But structurally, there were some issues with it. There was a lot of traffic, big trucks, and it needed some serious repair or reconstruction. And instead of doing that, they decided to test out what it would mean if they would close it off. There would be many people would be shocked, and taxi drivers, truck drivers were not very happy. But also, it was part of a kind of, let's say, pedestrianization, you could say, greenification of the center of Seoul, which is urbanized rapidly, and actually it lacked a lot of collective and high quality urban spaces. So it could be, this is not the only one. You see here that that the mayor of Seoul took this as one of his main purposes to make an impact, so to say, less asphalt and more green. And it was embraced by many people here. This on a highway was taken away. The highway was built on top of the river. The river comes back. Less lanes, more public space, etc. So this fitted in that collection. And here you see that connection out there, where the pedestrian connections would be optimized by this bridge, and suddenly a whole new world of possibilities to move around the city was created. And the up ramps to go on the city were extended. There were new connections being made with access points and staircases and lifts to really that it would reach out almost like a real tree with branches to the surrounding. And this is an ongoing thing, and you can imagine it will develop further in time. But here you see that image. I quickly go through it. So it offers a kind of really a big potential for future value creation as well. So even let's say the construction and the reconstruction, transformation of the street, the highway, cost quite some money, but actually the impact and the value increase was much bigger. And so looking back, they could almost could be maybe a different financing model for these kind of projects. And the park, the Solo Park, it was based on this need to do something with the structure of the road, and this problem was created. It was turned into an advantage by having this additional public space. Of course, there were still structural limitations, so we couldn't make it completely green with lots of trees, but there would be a certain amount of weight allowed, and that we kind of transformed to a certain series of pots and patches of green, and a more simple pedestrian finishing. And then again, this vertical access points with staircases and lifts, but also small pavilions on the ground floor, created this almost like this urban furniture for the neighborhood. So there will be small bars, but also little performance spaces, library, a flower shop, that kind of thing. And it also created a second layer of accessibility in the city. So on the ground floor, there would be more the traffic, and where the cars were before, there were the pedestrians, and they had actually more quiet and more attractive view. This was on the opening weekend. It was super busy, but still today, this is a place where people go for a walk during lunchtime, but also it's a shortcut from A to B. And in the evening, it's a moment where you meet your boyfriend or girlfriend and have a view over the city. And what was interesting to see that this the second layer of the ground floor created also a valuable second or third layer in the buildings. So bridges could be made from existing buildings. Of course, this was then had to be paid by the owner of the building, and actually the floor connecting to the highway bridge to the park became more valuable than the ground floor. So the bars on that level had more customers than the bars on the ground floor. So suddenly this kind of it had an effect on the buildings next to it. At night we have this light program where this kind of blue glow makes the building and the whole not I say the building, make the structure and the park visible in the urban busyness of Seoul. Here as well, a small movie. I quickly continue. And you see as well the impact it has on the existing streets. Activities come, new businesses arrive, because the impact of the park is quite significant on the, let's say the urban life. Good. Yeah, I forgot to tell that the plants ID is that the whole bridge is basically also a sort of arboretum for species. So the plants are organized from A to Z, and so all the species are you could basically walk. Well, all the roses are together, all the bamboos are together, all the pines are together. So that's the organization, and that's also in a way a living lab of how certain species work and function in the context of the urban city. Or only the visuals were not working.
So we were able to hear you perfectly, sir.
Okay, now then I go quickly.
And, you did started to, I think, talk about the Pune project.
Okay, yeah. Now I go quickly with this Moscow project where I explained about the different influences in the building that you have from the past in the constructivist and the Stalinistic architecture, and that we try to combine into a new piece of architecture that is still very, let's say, rooted in the context, but it's also something new. So it's designed for the specific location, but also so trying to how to organize and to design a building in a specific context. That this is one strategy, by absorbing, so to say, influences from the surrounding and turning it into something new. So for this building, we had this sort of stepping of the Stalinistic architecture, but we also looked at, say, the color and the detailing of the windows here in the Narcovan building on the other side of the street, so that there would be some kind of dialogue in different ways. In this case, the two buildings form a kind of a red gate, which happened to be the name of the metro station where this place is kind of most close to. Is also it's called Red Gate, and the route from the streets towards the Red Square, you could see that this is the perfect name for the Red Gate. So this was it sort of fell into place, and the discussion about the color is very different color as a typical building over there was then more or less accepted. Everybody understood why it had to be the red gate and the red 7. And of course, this building on the other side of the street was when I was there, it was wrapped in scaffolding because they needed to paint it every now and then. So we thought it would be much better to have bricks that would last longer and more durable in terms of colors as a base material. And in winter time, this kind of grayish Moscow scenery, this location would be a clear marking point, orientation point on that garden ring. And so different depending on how you drive around. This the building has this different appearances because of the volumetric composition. Here's this view towards the red square route. And the layout of the apartments was also organized like this, that by creating extra facade, more views were possible. And every floor would be slightly different because of that volumetric organization. So the building would kind of bend and twist. And a typical floor would then have a certain amount of apartments that, depending on the shape of the building, will have a certain typology. So instead of having one floor with one type of apartment, we have then a mixture. We have, for instance, in the middle where the building pushes in, we have a U-shaped apartment where you have actually, to avoid privacy issues, we have duplex apartments. We have really small ones of 30 square meters. And that is actually quite similar as we did in the Pune project, where it's not stratification of certain apartments, or one tower with apartment type A, one tower with apartment type B. That would be a mixture on every floor. On the ground floor, we have this a plinth, basically with part of the volume with public facilities and shared facilities for the people in the building. Conference rooms, fitness rooms, meeting rooms, and on the ground floor there's kind of accessible functions like restaurants and shops, surrounded around an atrium that's basically in the plinth of the base of the building. And what we did as well is that we created small differences in the facade, where you have the more the facade would go in, the larger the window would be. Creating this effect that you have a kind of more compact window on the edge, and then when it pushes in, the glass percentage is going up. And we spent a lot of time in perfectionizing the detailing of this brick composition. That this would really be elegant and clean. Typical apartment view for higher up. And for this, we went to we made mock-ups, and especially the corner detailing that this almost this perfect pattern would go around the corner. It's not that turned out to be complicated when you have an overhang, for instance, and how to detail this. So this is actually on the site, two different companies making a mock-up for the facade, and the bricks were specifically made for this project. Right now it's a bit higher already, but it will take, I would say, another 1.5 years to finish the project. So let's end with Pune and the future towers, a project that we have been working on intensively a couple of years ago, and for us it was the first Indian project, a fascinating country, and absolutely amazing to visit each time. A building that was also served already as a backdrop for the famous marriage culture you have. It was still in construction when the daughter of our client they chose this backdrop for their wedding. But it's also a building that is dealing with big scale, and I think especially in Asia, there's a lot of large-scale constructions being built, mostly residential and commercial, but you never really hear about in the architectural media. So we thought it would be a challenge to say, okay, can we make a project of around 100,000 square meters that will be published in the media? And so because it's different dynamics, so to say, in these kind of mass housing projects. Most of them are standardized layouts. copy-paste floor plates, optimizations when it comes to all kinds of regulations, and it results in a kind of almost like a factory product, and not that inspiring, but it's omnipresent. One interesting observation from when we started working in not only in India but also in other Asian countries, that is the difference in how you treat the facade and the compact layout. So in European context, let's say the urban form is mostly dictated, and then you make the plans inside it. It's sort of an efficient system. It's very compact in terms of facade length, whereas many Asian countries have their own ideal floor plan, and that floor plan is basically designed and then connected to the core. And here you see, for instance, that the natural ventilation of bathrooms creates an incredible amount of facade length. Where in that respect, insulation is not that crucial yet, at least. Construction costs are maybe also not so important in that respect. This would be a very expensive facade if you would do that in Europe, because the length would be, the facade is a large portion of the construction cost. And so each country has their own layer. This is a luxury housing project. You see that it's basically designed from inside out, and the European context is a little bit more from outside in. So yeah, that's more from us, and we try to kind of let the blurred boundaries. We try to work in that in between. The Amanora Park was a very fascinating project because we could see that there was already a park. Certain buildings were already built before the amount of let's say housing was there, and so you could see that there was already a certain quality available, and that we were asked to develop a concept for this main artery, the pipeline road, as it was called. Here the access to the vicinity. Of course, you know all about townships in India, but for us it was a fascinating development that you basically create a city within the city, and with all the facilities combined. Understandable in the kind of chaotic urban context of a city like Pune. Here you have a different life, a bit less hectic, where you can walk your kids to school, so to say. But it's also very high density, and that's intriguing. So we looked at a new to find a way to organize this mass, and we found the solution in the regulations between the fire escapes. So what's the most efficient way to organize that? We thought it would be this 30-meter rule, 2 ways, and then you can basically organize it. And then if you make that into a hexagonal grid, you have actually still views and quite an efficient layout. We then also looked at typical floor plans and room sizes and facade lengths. So this is this facade issue again. So that you have a compact way of doing it on 2 sides, or a long way on 1 side. And we started studying typical floor plans where you have certain shafts that would be like an outdoor facade in the building for service rooms. And I think it was very interesting to see how that thing would work. For instance, the 1.5 BHK, which was for us abracadabra in the beginning, but with it's a product. It's almost like a certain topology that everybody knows, and so we were a certain way limited to that. But on the other way, we were also able to design different apartments. We offered a system based on that escape length, where you could play with different housing types, smaller and larger ones, and you could make endless combinations in that typical 30-meter stretch, so to say, between the cores. So you could make 4 large ones, or you have 6 medium ones, or 10 or 8 smaller ones. But you could also, depending on the view and the orientation, mix that and create for every floor a different combination. We offered a system where basically the clients and their kind of team, their marketing team, would be able to compose the ideal mix of apartments, depending on. There were 3 buildings in the main competition, and we in the end built the first one. And in this system, of course, when it would be chopped off from the construction, from the plot line, special apartments would appear. Here you see a typical floor plan, and sometimes there would be an opening, There would be these cores in the shafts in the middle where natural ventilation was possible. So a typical wing on the building. Every wing is almost like a building, you could say. Yeah, it could be organized like this. So you have here a compact one, a bit larger one, a 3 BHK, and a very special one with a panorama balcony, and they all would share the same access corridor. So that was already something very different, because normally you would have one floor type, and you copy paste it around the core. You have basically a monoculture in one lift. Here, in terms of layout and combination, it would be much more diverse. So different type of people occupying these, living in these apartments, would be sharing that same circulation. So that resulted in this incredible amount of more than 1,000 apartments, of course, systematically organized, but also offering super large panorama apartments with roof decks to the most compact 1 BHK type in the building. And it was interesting to see that the client told us that there would be people actually buying multiple apartments when they could afford it, of course. Maybe already looking at the future, they could maybe rent it out, but also that their kids would be able to live in the same building in an apartment. So that was interesting to see. What we also see this is the openings. These are the collective spaces. That was very clear from the beginning, that in that mass you also need air, and like you have in a normal neighborhood, you also need little pocket parks and small plazas, not only at the ground floor but also in the building. That was part of the brief. Our client wanted to create a vertical neighborhood, vertical city. Inside the building you have also streets and collective spaces. Of course, the building itself forms a backdrop to the park from further away as well. At night, and at the same time, it's very rational. There was not much flavors to choose from when it comes to facade material. There's the main concrete structure. You have the brick infills, and then there's plaster on top. We created a very efficient window partitioning system. They have loggias, and then these colorful elements. When there are certain elements were taken away, then these double or triple pocket parks appear in the building. So here you see the first sketches for that. That would be possible to link from one floor to the next floor with staircases and the corridors. So this was their first idea, and then the marketing team from the clients gave back these images, and we were like, okay, this is quite a difference. Maybe we should not be so specific and tasteful. Maybe we should be more free when it comes to colors and functions. So there were ideas that every pocket could have a certain, they were called scoops, a certain activity or a certain user group. And ultimately it became a bit like that. So I can imagine it will be repainted by a different artist every now and then, and it has to see which function works. Maybe new functions appear. But it's still, the idea is quite attractive, that you have different atmospheres for certain age groups. There's a teenager group. There's for the small kids. There's a tea and coffee bar, etc. So this has to be, of course, developed in the course of time, and I think the neighborhood and the people themselves will probably pick it up. Another aspect is the collective gardens in between the blocks, where you have these decks. Every deck has a certain color as well. And the largest deck is the green one, obviously for grass, but also it's, with a big view to the park. And on the other side, you have each time a different color, and this also reflects the orientation of the colors in the building. So you have a blue room towards the blue deck, etc. There's collective functions like this. This is still under construction, but now it's finished. Of course, there's the big pool. When the 1,000 apartments are built, then this pool is, everybody has a little bit of this. Then you can make a big pool altogether. So that's the advantage of this big scale again. and Amanora is the place. So then the building itself, yeah, it's in a way it is iconic, but it's also very efficient and rational, and based on, let's say, the logic of Indian housing. That was in the beginning not always clear to us, but we now have understanding too. And not currently, but we have been working on an extension on a second stage, and I think it will come, but it will take some time. Now there's these gateway towers that are being built by I don't know who the architect is, but of course, I don't know the dynamics of the market, not always, of course, up and down, especially these days. So maybe in the future there will be another future towers coming, and they will be more tower-like. That has to do with the change of generation of regulations. The fact that the distance between the towers is now related to the width of the building, and this is of course a very wide building. And that would mean that the buildings would be very far apart. But if you chop them up again, then it would work. So in a way, that this new regulation is a bit of a pity, because that means it's even more difficult not to make a tower. So we have been organizing the design and reorganizing and connecting it into organizing it into 4 towers again. So this possibility to walk from here to there, where you see your boyfriend and girlfriends, and play on different floors, it won't be like that. It's more rationalized, and that's in a way a pity. But that's in a way you can see that development of these buildings is very much related to the change of regulations. That's the existing future towers, and this could be the new future towers, stage 2. And depending on how you look at it, so it's either one block again, but it's also four separate buildings. So that's where we are, and thank you very much. Too bad that the lecture was disrupted for the sound, but hopefully you could follow it nevertheless. Thank you very much. Let's have a little chat together.
Thank you, Architect Jacob, for your valuable time and giving us such a fantastic presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you for reminding us that blurred boundaries and identity could promote an architectural language. Your projects highlight how the boundaries between public spaces, art, architecture, and space could be blurred to promote community. The Work 12 project is particularly interesting. It has won a lot of awards. Your projects are very intriguing, and there was a lot to take away from your projects. A few of your projects actually took us 2 years back. Students and faculties at BRIC had a chance to work on child-friendly spaces through an initiative called Urban 95 in conjunction with TARU and Pune Municipal Corporation.
Okay.
So we transformed our public spaces to integrate safe spaces for children, where we would love to discuss more with you. But there are a few questions from the audience.
Okay.
How can the intangible aspects of bringing together the community interact with the built mass of the building? Does the natural light and volume of the building affect it? That's the question.
Is it specifically linked to one project, or is it a general question?
Yeah, seems so, sir.
Okay, now I think, of course, the building is always has a different lifespan. So then and it has to be able to adapt to the changes in the society, and I think that is something that we should be more aware of. So when we make a design, you could make it super specific for the current situation, but things change, and maybe in 10 years' time things are different, and maybe in 40 years' time it's even more different. And I'm very much aware of that right now, that we should be able to make buildings that are adaptable. And of course, when the things are too adaptable or they become maybe boring. So you have to find a balance between specificness and sort of genericness, so to say. And I think for instance, that Werk 12 building is an example of that. It's a very straightforward building, but the fact that the ceilings are a bit higher makes it possible to think of many different future possibilities. It could even become a housing project. So I think in that way, I think we now make a lot of buildings that are super specifically geared to one product. I think the housing market is very clear, and we don't want to have the same houses all over the place. But this is right now that's being constructed. So maybe we should think of different ways to organize that. So that in the future these buildings could be transformed, that the layouts could be changed, that units could be combined. That's a topic that will return, because we have to be, especially when we use, for instance, materials like concrete. We cannot get. We're not in a world where we can live without concrete, but we also know that we have to change the use of concrete as well. So we should limit it. So when you use it, it should be used in a way that it can last for a long time.
Yes, rightly said, sir. Totally agree. And there is a lot to discuss upon this topic actually. But thank you for your perspective. Our next question is, your project Seoul 7017. Could you please briefly talk about how the balance is managed between the development led by the local authority and private developers when there is a seamless pedestrian network between different city areas?
Yeah, there was of course the city of Seoul was the client, and they organized, let's say, this transformation of the main highway structure, and together with them we organized the whole layout of the park, but as well the connection to private owners and buildings around. That was then we offered a system where they could add and connect to that, and that of course was in connection with the local authorities. For instance, if there was a hotel next to the park, the hotel had a lobby on the ground floor. Now the park was there, and then they in discussion with us in the city, they modified their lobby so that it had a second entrance on the level of the park with a bridge, which became now more or less the first entrance, because many people actually use that bridge. So that's, I think it's an interesting example how kind of, if the plan is clear, if the rules are clear, other people can step into it and adapt to it. So that is not a complete chaos, but it's also kind of it's also not completely frozen. So there's a certain amount of flexibility, but on the other hand, there's also certain systems and certain principles that have to be followed.
Yes, thank you so much, sir. We actually have a lot of questions pouring in. Unfortunately,
Okay.
we have a time crunch, and
Sure.
we wouldn't be able to take more questions.
No.
Apologies, audience. We
Too
have
bad. Yeah.
all the questions with us. We would try to get back to you with the answers. So we will
Okay.
connect with you for the same.
Okay.
So
We can maybe
thank you.
organize this in a different moment, and I'm happy to come have a bit
Yes.
of a dialogue
Thank you,
with the students.
Yes,
So I
definitely.
hope we have
sir.
a fantastic lecture day together, and it was a pleasure and an honor to speak to you over this Zoom in Pune. And too bad I couldn't join you, but maybe in the future there will be another opportunity.
Definitely, sir. We are also very grateful and honored to have you with us. So thank you again. And that was a very gripping